The land of the Southern Viets. This is the literal translation of the word Vietnam, the stretched S-shaped territory to the east of the Indochinese peninsula. It shares borders with China to the north and with Laos and Cambodia to the west. A long, long territory with an incredible variety of landscapes, from a long bay with its 1,900 islets to the Mekong Delta, an immense plain crisscrossed by 9 branches of the Great River, from the rice terraces of the north and center to the mountains, some of which reach heights of over 2,000 meters, the sugarloaf-like karst hills, the deep valleys, the dense forests, the lakes, the waterfalls, and the luxuriant jungles. Vietnam, a fantasy destination, fulfills all its promises when you explore it. What's more, it boasts 3,160 kilometers of coastline, and its 2 extremities are 1,650 kilometers apart as the crow flies. But if you were to drive from the Lung Cou Flag Tower, in the very north of the country, to Cape Ca Mau, its southernmost point, you'd have to travel 4,675 kilometers. In other words, a long, long journey. For our third trip to this Southeast Asian country, after 2007 and 2011, we chose to follow the route between Ninh Binh, nicknamed the Bay of Along on Land, and the Mekong Delta, passing through Hoi An and the Central Highlands, home to various ethnic minorities, the best known of which are the Gia Rai, Ede, Manong, and Sedong. As soon as we arrive in Hanoi, we contact our driver and embark for Ninh Binh province, an hour and a half south of the capital. We set down our bags for 3 days in a small homestay in Khe Ha, between Hoa Lu and Ninh Binh. After a short restorative nap, we embark mid-afternoon for our first trip through the meandering Trang An site. Lots of tourists at the start, but the boats gradually spread out along the various branches of the river. We stop off at the Trin Temple, nestled at the foot of the mountains and built in honor of generals of the Dinh dynasty. 2 bronze cranes guard the entrance. After passing, head down through our first cave, a modest 60-meter long, we stop at the literally surrounded by karst hills as if in a jewel box. The second cave, lower and narrower, winds its way 150 meters under the mountain. Each time you emerge, you're struck by the magnificence of the place, sublimated by the golden light of late afternoon. The Suoi Tien Temple is the object of a special cult. Every year, in early spring, a procession is organized by the local population. Hundreds of boats descend the river, passing through 10 caves before reaching the temple to pray and make offerings for the safety of the country, a good harvest, and the happiness of all. The Vu Lam Palace was a military base under the Tran dynasty. It features many artifacts of great historical value, which are the memory of a prosperous dynasty in Vietnam's feudal era. The next morning, we set off on a scooter for the day to discover Hoa Lu, Vietnam's ancient capital, surrounded by an impressive panorama of limestone peaks. Hoa Lu, was the capital of Vietnam in the 10th and 11th centuries. It is located in Truong Yen Commune. It is one of the most popular destinations in Ninh Binh province. To enter the imperial citadel, we have to cross, on foot, the large stone bridge and pass through a monumental portico. The Temple of King Din, the site's most emblematic monument, was built of carved wood and stone in the 17th century. It stands at the foot of Ma Yen Mountain. Its peaceful, serene ambiance suggests, however, that it is much older. It is the best preserved vestige of the entire city. The old village of Truong Yen is just as interesting, with its colonial houses and extraordinarily abundant gardens, overgrown with bonsai, flowering bushes, and fruit trees. Wandering through the alleys, we discover local street art and propaganda posters glorifying the worker, agriculture, tradition, and the party. The next day, still on our bikes, we decide to lose ourselves in the countryside to observe daily life. The weather, though gloomy and misty, does not detract from the majesty of the panoramas. Rice transplanting is the region's main activity. As in all Asian countries, rice plays a major role in the population's diet. Here, it is eaten 3 times a day, including breakfast. Vietnam is the world's 5th largest rice producer. From field to bowl, the cultivation process is not so simple. First of all, the land has to be plowed and stirred up with the help of buffaloes, so as to be ready for sowing. Then the plots have to be flooded once the plants have been laid out by hand. A few weeks later, flowers appear, and the bunches of stems produce grains wrapped in pods. At the end of summer, the watering stops and the farmer can harvest his rice. It's a tough, grueling, tedious job. You're always bent over, always with your hands and feet in the water and mud. Gradually, a damp mist invades the landscape, revealing a different, almost ghostly atmosphere. For our second boat trip, we can't escape the classic land tour of Along Bay. The 2-hour trip along the river that winds its way between the mountains, the most popular with tourists, a veritable Tam Cock highway. The scenery is absolutely breathtaking. There are plenty of vendors selling drinks, cookies, fruit, and various sweets. Tam Cock, which means 3 grots, as these are the ones formed by erosion that allow us to cross the mountains. After 3 days in the Ninh Binh region, we take the night train for our second stop in the center of the country. Early in the morning, we get off at Da Nang and take a cab to our hotel in Hoi Han, where we immediately rent motorcycles for our first ride in the surrounding countryside. The village of Cam Than, often called the village of water coconut trees, is famous for its mangrove palm forests. Today, tourists from the region and beyond flock here in their woven bamboo baskets to navigate the sometimes crowded canals. These sturdy, round boats are used by locals for inshore fishing. Here, 15 kilometers from the town of Tam Kai, is the place where dozens of motorboats and basket boats park before and after their return from fishing for crab, shrimp, and various fish. The market only gathers here in summer. It starts every day at 4 a.m. and finishes before 9 a.m. Along the way, we come across a charming pagoda being restored. A painter is busy reviving the colors of the murals. Return to Hoi An. 30 kilometers south of Da Nang, on the Thu Bon River, this city of 120,000 inhabitants, once a major spice trading center, is considered one of the country's pearls. Its historic quarter, with its narrow streets and old houses in Viet, Japanese, and Chinese styles, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Traditions are still alive and well in the old town, even if many of the old stores have been converted into tourist-oriented businesses. In addition to souvenir shops, there are tailors, art galleries, restaurants, and cafes whose buildings are maintained to preserve the image of a glorious past. Colonial-style French houses are also easy to spot. The art of Vietnamese calligraphy, also known as Thu Phap, is a popular form of artistic expression in the country's culture, originating in China. It's an art that highlights the elegance of writing, a concentrate of harmony and philosophy, expressed through beautiful ideograms made with bamboo brushes and black ink on traditional paper. The Japanese covered bridge is considered the jewel of Hoi An. Dating from the late 16th century, its center features a small temple dedicated to Huyen Tien Dai Day. Of all the streets in the old town, the one running east-west along the Thu Bon River is always the busiest. The architecture of the houses is intact, and the atmosphere changes from relaxed during the day to intense after dark. Lanterns are everywhere in Hoi An. An essential decorative element in homes and stores and a symbol of the city, they even have their own festival on the 14th day of each lunar month. On this evening, numerous lanterns of different shapes and colors are lit by candlelight and placed on the Thu Bon River. At 8 p.m., all the fluorescent lights are switched off, allowing the magical glow of the lanterns to be seen along the river. But what started out as a romantic experience has turned into a tourist frenzy in recent years, which can quickly become unbearable. The crowds on the quays are so great that it's difficult to get around, and there are so many boats that they have to steer constantly to avoid colliding with each other. Fortunately, the magic starts to happen again as soon as we enter the narrow streets of the old quarter. "50 kilometers from Hoi An, my son is a group of 72 Hindu temples dedicated to Shiva. Built between the 4th and 14th centuries, my son was the spiritual capital of the Champa kings. It is often compared to Angkor Wat. This temple complex stretches over a 2-kilometer valley surrounded by 2 mountain ranges that form the watershed of the sacred Thuban River. Its location gives it a strategic importance in history, thanks to the natural protection of the surrounding Rocky Mountains. Of the 73 monuments, only 13 remain today, as the Viet Cong used my son as a strategic base, and as a result, the site was heavily bombed by the Americans. Its Indian-influenced creations set my son apart as an archaeological site. At various stages in history, each temple was built to pay homage to a different dynasty. It therefore reflects its own architectural style with different impressions and unique features. Tam Than is a very special village. The main inhabitants are fishermen. Their boats, lying on the beach, are ready for another day at sea as they check their hulls or repair their nets. But above all, it's an open-air museum of local street art. Under the hands of young artists, over 100 houses in Tam Than feature colorful murals depicting familiar images of the Vietnamese village. Portraits, landscapes, daily life, the paintings are regularly renewed. They give Tam Than an exceptional character. On the morning of day 7, we set off for the Central Highlands, an area little known to tourists. This area of vast forests and impressive mountains is home to ethnic minorities who have always preserved their traditions and identity. In the Kung Tung province, we meet the Jarai people, the largest ethnic group in the highlands. The Nha Rong communal house sits at the heart of every village. Originally, it served a defensive function, sheltering villagers from attacks by neighboring ethnic groups or wild animals. Today, it retains a major social function. It's home to teenagers and passing visitors, where evenings are spent chatting, singing, playing music, and listening to legends around the fire. It also serves as a workshop for the manufacture of work and play utensils, crossbows, arrows, nets, hoods, and other basketry, as well as a place where the elders pass on their knowledge and skills. After a night in a particularly basic homestay, we continue our journey towards Kontum on a road in perfect condition. A gathering at the edge of a village arouses our curiosity. An exhibition of traditional Ba Na weaving. The women are all gathered on a shaded platform. Each weaves a fabric from the cotton or hemp she harvests, creating her own personal design and colors. The loom is not fixed. The weft is simply laid out on 2 independent planks and can be wound around itself. To tension the piece, the woman attaches one of the planks to her body and secures the other to a tree, stake, or railing. or holds it at a distance with her foot. A long bamboo needle completes the weaving equipment. A tiny fruit and basketry market is nearby. Forests occupy 50% of the area of Kontum province, home to precious trees, rare forest species, unique birds and animals. These include ironwood, teak, basia, sandalwood, and ebony, as well as valuable medicinal herbs such as ginseng, angelica, and cardamom. Kontum's basalt soils are also ideal for rubber cultivation. Buon Ma Thuot lies close to the Cambodian border. The villages we pass through are often populated by people of Cambodian origin who have come to Vietnam in search of work. The long wooden houses on stilts lining the streets are part of the unique culture of the Edi ethnic group, whose total population is estimated at 200,000, where extended families live. The lineage is matrilineal. We end the day with an excellent coffee in a renovated traditional house in the village of Ako Dong, considered to be the origin of the town of Buon Ma Thuot, and frequented by its wealthy youth. Buon Ma Thuot is considered the coffee capital of Vietnam. Thanks to its basal soils, which are particularly well suited to coffee growing, the area planted with coffee trees is increasing all the time. Few people know it, but the region is now ranked first in the world in terms of harvested coffee yield, and Vietnam now occupies second position among coffee exporting countries. It is expected to produce more than 31.3 million 60 kilos bags of coffee over 2023-2024, representing almost 18% of world production. This is almost exclusively Robusta coffee, over 90%, while Arabica occupies just 6% of the coffee growing area. With 200,000 hectares under cultivation, the central highland province of Dak Lak accounts for 70% of the country's coffee production. Coffee is an indispensable beverage in Vietnamese life. Coffee tasting is the subject of a whole ritual, sometimes very different depending on the region.
So this one will not work most of the time. But when...
Le premier niveau, c'est pour le café premium. C'est le plus large. Donc il reste en surface, il descend ici, il est récupéré ici et c'est celui qui part à l'exportation pour les riches. Il y a un deuxième niveau en dessous, donc dans lequel tombe le café qui est consommé par les locaux ici. Donc il descend également par là et il arrive ici et il est empaqueté, il est en sachet ici pour la consommation locale. Et le plus mauvais, donc, qui est ici, il descend en bas, il se retrouve ici et c'est celui qui est envoyé pour les supermarchés en Europe.
In a coffee factory, we discover the whole process of making, selecting, and packaging coffee. Premium coffee beans are carefully sorted in the workshop. The visit ends with a tasting session following the local ritual. Aluminum filter, precise dosage, first wetting of the coffee, waiting a few seconds, then a second wetting to the top of the filter, covering and waiting a minute before tasting. Coffee from the highlands has particular characteristics: a high caffeine content, a pronounced taste, and less acidity. It has a variety of notes, sometimes reminiscent of butter, oil, or caramel, or even evoking the taste of highland sun and wind. Although coffee is the master asset of the highlands region, rice fields are still omnipresent. After China, India, Indonesia, and Bangladesh, Vietnam is the fifth largest rice-producing country in the world, producing nearly 29 million tons a year. located on the Krong Anna River, some 30 kilometers southwest of the town of Buon Mae Thuot. Dre Sap is perhaps the most impressive waterfall in the Central Highlands. Dre Sap means smoky falls in Ede, as the water falls from a height of 10 meters, creating smoke-like mists. Unfortunately, we passed by a little too early in the season. On the way to Dak Lak, we stop off at a Menong village. This ethnic minority not only hunts and domesticates elephants, but also cultivates cotton, weaves, and, for some of them, makes crude pottery, shaped by hand and fired over a wood fire. Dak Lak, the second largest lake in the country, covering 500 hectares. Bordered by mountains, some of which rise to over 2,000 tamim, lush green valleys and luxuriant vegetation, it is a real gem in the heart of the highlands. A stroll through the rice paddies as soon as we arrive in the late afternoon allows us to appreciate their splendor. We rent motorcycles to explore the countryside and villages around the lake for 2 days. The lake is pierced by a multitude of islands and islets, some just a few dozen square meters in size. Rice transplanting, herding, weaving, and fishing, sometimes with electricity, in the lake or its adjacent canals, are the main activities of the minorities living on the shores of Dak Lak. On the way to the south coast, we stop to observe a floating village of fish farmers on one of the many lakes that dot the region. Dried fish stores abound in the vicinity. The town of Mui Ne is a long ribbon of white and red sand dunes fringed by coconut palms. Mui Ne means sheltered peninsula because it is used as a seasonal port by local fishermen. Easily accessible from Ho Chi Minh, it has gradually become a small seaside resort, much frequented by the inhabitants of the former Saigon. Although tourism is now the main source of employment, fishermen are still numerous in Mui Ne, and colorful basket boats can be seen weaving in and out of the larger boats to collect the catch and sell it directly on the beach. The indigenous cuisine is made up of different types of fish and shellfish brought in by local fishermen, but it's the squid that's really in abundance here. Day 13, and our first stop in the Mekong Delta at Mai Tho, the gateway to the Delta. We hire pirogues to reach the island of Toi San, a veritable tropical garden where 300 families live, and at the heart of which is an artisanal factory making caramels and coconut sweets. There's also an impressive crocodile farm. After an overnight stop at the Mekong home in Ben Tre, where we were lucky enough to bump into the explorer Dr. Jean-Louis Etienne and chat with him for a few minutes, we cycled to the pier on the Ham Luang River to take the ferry around the floating islet of Uk, a paradise of grapefruit and pineapple orchards and verdant coconut forests. The Mekong Delta, mother of all rivers in the Thai language, covers 55,000 km² and is home to 18 million inhabitants who depend on it. The Ang Temple, the oldest pagoda in Vietnam, was built in the 10th century. In the middle of the main hall is an altar displaying the main statue of Buddha over 2 high. It is surrounded by 50 Buddha statues of different sizes, carved from stone or wood, which are highly valuable works of art. On the walls of the main hall, picturesque paintings recount the life of Buddha Shakyamuni. On the ceiling, we notice 4 large murals, which each reveal a stage in the life of the Buddha: birth, ordination, enlightenment, and nirvana. 10 centuries later, the architectural works and countless antiques, artifacts, sculptures, reliefs of the temple are still in perfect condition. This pagoda is the pride of the province and the Khmer community in general. The Khao Can Tho in Vietnamese, with a main span of 550 meters, is the largest cable-stayed bridge in Southeast Asia and a national pride. At the crack of dawn, we embark on a branch of the Mekong to visit the Kai Rang floating market, formed in the early years of the 20th century. Fruit, agricultural produce, and specialties from the Mekong Delta are the main items on sale. The market is in full swing between 5 and 9 a.m. Exchanges are made from boat to boat, juggling or passing objects by hand. The main market items are agricultural produce, handicrafts, and basic necessities. A 3 to 5 m high pole hanging from the boat announces the products sold by its owner. During our previous visit to Kai Rang in 2011, hundreds of junks and boats were engaged in a typical disorderly ballet here. But the COVID-19 has disrupted this centuries-old method of river trade in favor of other types of transport and other places. The floating markets of the Mekong Delta are now a mere shadow of their former selves, a fact that travel agencies are careful not to mention. Ban Trang rice cake factories have been operating here for over 30 years, all year round. There are 4 types of rice cakes: salted cakes, plain cakes, egg rolls, and cakes with coconut milk and sesame. The latter are crispier and are used to wrap spring rolls. They come in various sizes, from 30 cm to 40 cm in diameter. They are renowned for their finesse, rice fragrance, and coconut and sesame taste. At Cantho's Daily Land Market, you'll find everything. Fruit and vegetables galore, meat, mainly pork and chicken, flowers, eels, octopus, squid, tofu, and of course rice and coconuts. We spend 2 nights on the island of An Bin. It's actually a bunch of small islands linked by modest bridges and crisscrossed by a network of narrow dirt roads that wind their way through lush vegetation. Probably one of the most beautiful areas of the Mekong Delta. In the late afternoon, we take a motorboat ride among the countless shady arroyos that form a mysterious aquatic labyrinth on the island. Life here is simple and rural. Fishing, growing vegetables on floating strips, or fruits such as mangoes, grapefruits, longans, bananas, guavas, mandarins, coconuts, or tamarind. The next day, we rent motorcycles for the day and decide to get lost on the narrow roads and paths that crisscross An Bin. Every day in Kai Bay, hundreds of young people gather by the river to enjoy the national cultural sport of the Vietnamese, kite flying. The art of aerial puppetry dates back over 300 years. Today, kites are mainly made of bamboo frames, meticulously sharpened to the smallest detail, with great precision in size to ensure balance and easy takeoff. In both Kai Bay and Kai Rang, the famous floating market has all but disappeared. The owner of the homestay where we're staying suggests we take a walk to Tan Phong. It's a small island town in the middle of the Tien River. After 15 minutes on the boat, the atmosphere changes completely. We switch to a pirogue, adapted to the narrow canals winding through the island. The vegetation is lush, and the atmosphere incredibly soothing. It's not easy to pass each other in these arroyos overrun with water hyacinths. There are many fruit farms in Tan Phong, as the alluvial deposits make the land ideal for cultivation. Day 17. We complete our Mekong Delta loop. On the way to Ho Chi Minh, we stop off at a traditional incense stick factory. Incense plays a fundamental role in ancestral and religious rites, in Vietnam and elsewhere. It is the smoke from the incense that establishes the link between the living and the dead. First, bamboo is cut and rounded into thin sticks. 1/3 of the stick is then coated with red paint. The other 2/3 are covered with incense powder, obtained from fragrant plant substances, which are ground to a powder and mixed in proportions determined beforehand. This is what gives each incense its unique fragrance. We conclude our journey by exploring the floating village of Tan Lap, located in Long An Province, 100 kilometers from Ho Chi Minh. The area is home to an ecosystem consisting of an oasis surrounded by the largest Kajapu forest in Vietnam and a maze of narrow canals and mysterious bridges lined with mangroves. Discover it by boat or on foot along the 5 kilometers of stilted log paths through the swampy jungle, teeming with a wealth of flora and fauna. Thousands of birds and storks call this area home. Walking through the forest is an adventure in itself, in an atmosphere of exceptional serenity. Our journey comes to an end after 20 days and 2,300 kilometers of road trip in the land of the dragon and the lotus. Vietnam has a tremendous capacity for attraction. Its landscapes of exceptional beauty, its unique sights known the world over, its cuisine now popular all over the planet, its highly diverse culture, its many ethnic groups still preserving their traditional way of life. Today, Vietnam is one of the most dynamic countries in Southeast Asia, with a growth rate of almost 10% by 2022, and is set to become the 3rd largest economy in Asia. But this accelerated metamorphosis, concrete development, cultural standardization, extortion of land from local populations, construction of gigantic housing estates on the coast, development of mass tourism, unfortunately runs the risk of obliterating all its assets in the more or less long term.